back to CBS News 24/7. I'm Reed Cowan. So we are watching in real time these devastating and deadly wildfires in Los Angeles County. 5 dead, thousands of structures leveled. We don't know how many of those are businesses and how many of those are homes. It is just too urgent of a situation right now to get a specific count. We can tell you in recent moments, officials lifted some evacuation orders in Hollywood, but many of the people go back to find nothing. They're out of their homes. Just look at that. That is a huge swath of one city there leveled. There are 5 fires that we're watching now in total. The 2 biggest fires are about 40 miles away from each other, each more than 10,000 acres in size. So let's start with the Eaton fire. It's about 3 times as big as LAX. If you've flown in and out of LAX, just multiply that by 3. That's how huge that fire is. The Palisades fire, roughly a fifth the size of Philadelphia. Still no containment on those 2 fires. So let's talk more about numbers. Because of those numbers that we just told you about by way of just acreage, roughly 179,000 people seeing scenes like this, on the run, just like firefighters are, evacuation orders. Those numbers coming to us from officials who are watching in real time, homes burned to the ground, neighborhood by neighborhood. More than 1,300 structures burned or destroyed. More than 60,000 other structures at this hour still under threat. Some of those, by the time you watch your dinner time headlines, will be gone. And just this morning, the LA County Sheriff's Department announced 20 arrests already made for those who decided to go in and steal from people who had already lost so much amidst the fires. Listen to this.
We continue to conduct roving patrols, manning hard road closures, providing security in evacuation areas to prevent anyone who may be tempted to engage in criminal behavior like looting. It was mentioned earlier before by the supervisor, and I'm going to make this crystal clear to everybody out there. Over last night and this morning, we are up to 20 individuals who chose to go into our areas and deprive these poor people who have been through so much of their property. Absolutely unacceptable. And I'm going to give direction to our department members. As you know, when we have an evacuation order by law, if you remain in that area, you are guilty of a misdemeanor. If you commit certain crimes, it could jump up to a felony. I'm going to be asking our employees to start enforcing that. That is very different than a curfew. Why? Because it's 24/7. I don't have to wait for the sun to go down or the sun to come up. If you are in one of these areas and you do not belong there, you are going to be subject to arrest.
And they mean it. And, you know, when you hear about looters and you think, well, wait a minute, the homes are leveled. Keep in mind, fire jumps. So one home is standing, others are burned on a street. What is certain is most people are not there by their homes. And so that means that looters are seeing an opportunity. So that is a strong word from law enforcement. If you do it, you'll be punished. You'll be caught. Now, let's talk about the other reality, and that is the fact that those dry conditions can actually blow in flaming embers into those neighborhoods, like we've said for days. 1 home will survive, 5 homes will fall. We're talking about the worst dry conditions. So a lot of people have already lost their homes because of that phenomenon, with something on fire blowing on wind. Now, there are human touchstones to this. We wanted to introduce you to somebody that our crews met and very much felt for. 91-year-old Dale Short lived his whole life in his Pasadena home. It went up in flames. Listen.
I'm going to break down again. That's what I feel. It's my whole life.
Everything was in there.
So Short says he lived in that home for 6 decades. It was the place where his children were raised. Think about the Christmases and the Hanukkahs and the family celebrations, the challenges that happened underneath that roof and the life planning. But he says he's tough at the age of 90, and he will start all over again. That's all that's left of everything he worked to build up in his life. So we also know people are stepping forward. Likely you're seeing on social media people saying, hey, I have a house, come lean on me, and now we're seeing some corporate responsibility as well. Airbnb providing people displaced by the fires raging there in Los Angeles with temporary housing and for free. They're doing it in partnership with the nonprofit 211 LA, and we can tell you right now, Airbnb is really focusing on those who've either lost homes or were forced to evacuate. That program is funded by Airbnb and some private donations and hosts who have said, look, we have a home, we'll give a home. So go ahead and offer it at free or even discount rates during these emergencies. Jess, we see the raging fires. We know the wind that's pushing them, but we also during these times see many people step forward to help, our better angels, and reminding us that community matters, that we need each other, and that people are good.
And that whole community is such a strong one as is. And so as we head into the coming days, you'll continue to watch amazing stories come out of such devastation. One thing I want to talk about is just those who aren't directly impacted by the fire are still dealing with poor air quality widespread throughout Los Angeles, though. And as the winds start to shift as we head into this weekend's forecast, they're going to notice it a lot more in areas that haven't seen such dense smoke. So let's start off with the map real fast. What I want to show you is the red flag warning and the high wind warnings that are in effect right now widespread throughout Southern California. Heading into this weekend's forecast, we're still dealing with low relative humidity. All that color down there shows you what the National Weather Service has issued. So that low relative humidity mixed with these strong winds are two key ingredients when it comes to these red flag warnings lasting until Friday. And air quality alerts too widespread throughout this area due to these 5 fires burning. Some of the smaller ones off into those mountains like the Lydia fire and the Hearst fire, but the large ones, the Eaton fire in the Palisades, those are the ones that are causing so much devastation, and these were fueled by such strong winds. As we take a look at the wind conditions, I mean, we had 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts in Altadena just yesterday, and we take a look at other areas like Burbank, 84-mile-per-hour winds. It only takes about a 15 to 20-mile-per-hour wind gust for some of these spot fires to occur, and the reason why these strong Santa Ana winds are still lasting into the forecast today has to do with a strong area of high pressure offshore mixed with a strong low area of pressure just inland, and that together creates this pressure gradient that allows for those winds to continue to push offshore into the overnight hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow. And this is in dry communities that have barely received any rain. I mean, since last May, they got close to around 1/4 inch, but these dry communities are seeing the devastation from these strong winds continuing to fuel these fires. So here's where we're at right now. We head all the way over into areas like Hidden Springs, close to 50-mile-per-hour wind gust right now in live time. We forecast about 30 to 40 mile-per-hour winds in those exact same mountains as we head into the 2 o'clock hour today. As we head into the overnight hours tonight, the sun starts to set. Those winds don't die down just yet, and that also bleeds down into those lower elevated communities too, just along the foothills. We wake up tomorrow morning with a little bit of a shift in the forecast, though. The winds are going to start changing directions, and that's the exact setup that's going to allow for that smoke to kind of circulate its way back inland in areas like Los Angeles, all the way over into most of those beach communities too. So lots to talk about when it comes to that smoke and how concentrated it is right now just along those hills. This is impacting millions of people down into Los Angeles. We'll have more on that coming up in a bit and just how that's impacting them. But the weather, it's not it's those two ingredients alone, you know, relative humidity and winds. Those are the big reasons why we're concerned for those firefighters out there right now.
Just dries things out and it makes the situation worse. Jess, thank you so much. So we've heard from President Joe Biden pledging a lot of federal disaster assistance to the people in California. And while the office of the presidency focuses on that state, so also do members of Congress. So we know this. People impacted need major emergency aid, and they're going to need it in a very big way. In fact, FEMA Director Deanne Criswell spoke about the importance of getting that aid to the people impacted there on the ground, regardless of politics. Let's listen into that.
You know, these types of tragedies that we're seeing right now in California, they don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. All of these people have been impacted. And the dedicated women and men at FEMA are going to continue to provide support to all of those people that have been impacted by this fire or these fires, as well as the work that we're continuing to do in Georgia, North Carolina, and Florida from Hurricanes Helene and Milton. We're going to continue to provide all of the services that they are eligible for and ensure that we are supporting them through their recovery process.
That word going out on CBS Mornings to our partners there. Big question for so many Californians, will they get that help? So let's bring in CBS News Congressional correspondent Nicole Killion. Nicole, good to be with you today. Even before the fires, FEMA funds was really a major issue and some would say a sticking point among lawmakers. So walk us through the dilemmas where that is concerned and why some Democrats think that Californians may not get the assistance or the full assistance that they need.
Well, I think let's take a step back and keep in mind that in the government funding bill that passed at the end of last year, there was about $100 billion that was allocated for disaster relief and aid, mostly in part due to hurricanes Milton and Helene that the administrator referenced. But it's a significant pot of money and one that certainly FEMA can tap into to assist people in the state of California. That being said, Democratic leaders especially have said that Congress stands poised to provide additional assistance to the state of California if needed, if those types of emergency or disaster declarations come in. So they do have some money to work with. If they need more, Democratic lawmakers are certainly willing to contribute more on Congress's part. The question is if Republicans will be willing to do so as well. Certainly there is bipartisan concern about what is occurring out in California. Very disturbing images seeing many of these communities. I mean, I grew up in Southern California, seeing many of these communities go up in flames. So it is something that lawmakers are paying attention to and just kind of standing at the ready if needed.
So just moments ago, House lawmaker Dusty Johnson introduced a bill to repurchase the Panama Canal. Is this for show? Is this a continuation of the narrative we're seeing coming out of the incoming Trump administration? What is happening there?
Well, obviously, we know a lot of attention has been focused on the Panama Canal, given the President-elect Trump's recent comments around potentially trying to take it back over. Of course, we know Panama retains control of the canal currently, but under this new legislation presented by Dusty Johnson, who is a pretty strong China hawk, you know, his main concern in terms of introducing this legislation is he feels that China has too many potential interests down there, that is of concern, particularly in such a critical juncture where so many shipping vessels must pass through. So from that standpoint, this legislation could potentially lay the groundwork for the United States to purchase back the Panama Canal if that is a course of action that the president-elect decides to take. Now, while it does have a number of co-sponsors, whether or not this moves forward or is more just kind of a symbolic gesture in light of the president's stance is something we continue to watch.
All right, and I want to ask you about something that Americans are watching. It's bubbling up in the headlines. It's something called the Laken-Riley Act. Asking because Democrats, some of them are signaling now they are on board. What is that act, and is this seen as a win for day one of the Republican Trump administration?
Well, certainly it's been a priority among congressional Republicans, and on the campaign trail, of course, President-elect Donald Trump certainly made immigration and border security a key theme and often referenced this case about Laken-Riley, of course, the Georgia nursing student who was murdered late last year. Of course, the undocumented immigrant who was convicted has since been sentenced. And so from this standpoint, this legislation would essentially make it easier for ICE, federal law enforcement, to detain undocumented immigrants, particularly for theft-related crimes. So this really is in direct response to the circumstances surrounding Laken-Riley's murder. It did pass with bipartisan support in the House, not just once, but twice. However, in the last Congress, it didn't advance in the Senate because the Senate was controlled by Democrats. Well, now it's controlled by Republicans, which is why we could see a vote later this week on it, and it could very well get bipartisan support here in this chamber as well. So from that standpoint, it would be a significant win for congressional Republicans who have been pushing this measure for some time now.
Viewers to CBS News 24/7 will remember we carried live the arguments for the sentencing of Laken-Riley's killer from her own family. It is fresh on our minds. Nicole Killion, thank you so much for updating us there on Capitol Hill. We wanted to get to some live video right now of something that is happening following the funeral services for the late President Jimmy Carter. This is a live camera focused on Joint Base Andrews. Why are we there? Well, it's because this is the next stop for the body of the former president who has been lying in state inside the Capitol Rotunda before his services, where all living presidents attended and many dignitaries and many members of the Carter family spoke about his legacy, his life of service, the political achievements, the wins, some of the losses as well. And now at Joint Base Andrews, we are seeing his body, which will now be transferred to an airplane to take him home, where a private service will mark his burial. We'll be right back. Breaking news today about President-elect Donald Trump's work to stop sentencing in his hush money case. So Trump fired 2 shots trying to get this done. So let's talk about the first shot, a petition to the New York Court of Appeals, and then the second shot asking the Supreme Court to weigh in. So here's your update on that first shot, or the first part, where the New York request is concerned. The judge in New York just declined to block Trump's sentencing. So now, part 2, we await for the Supreme Court to weigh in. And while we wait, there's a pretty urgent ticking clock here. Trump's sentencing is set to take place as early as tomorrow. So all eyes on SCOTUS. Now, we just got this from the Manhattan DA's office. Quote, the defendant makes the unprecedented claim that the temporary presidential immunity he will possess in the future fully immunizes him now, weeks before he even takes the oath of office. It goes on to say this extraordinary immunity claim is unsupported by any decision from any court. It is axiomatic, they say, that there is only one president at a time, close quote. Bringing you up to speed here, a jury found Trump guilty of 34 felony counts for falsifying business records last summer. CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi joins us live on the stream today. Always good to talk to you, my friend. You make me smarter here. So does the New York decision influence the Supreme Court's thinking as we have all eyes on the Supreme Court with that ticking clock in mind?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that was sort of the expected course of action by the New York state courts. And as you mentioned, Trump's lead attorney, Todd Blanche, had already sort of had the wheels in motion to go to the Supreme Court as early as yesterday. And I think it's likely we will hear the court weigh in given their expedited mandate to prosecutors. We heard today from Manhattan prosecutors that they obviously are opposing this last-ditch effort to stop the sentencing. But, you know, the Supreme Court has a 6-3 conservative supermajority. 3 of those justices were appointed during President Trump's first term of office. And nobody really saw the immunity decision coming. I think, you know, it's not necessarily the Hail Mary that it's been described as being. The court very well likely may side with Trump. You know, as you noted, that argument there that they're making is that this broad presidential immunity that the Supreme Court granted earlier this summer, that is supposed to, be bestowed upon presidents-elect as well. So we'll see where that goes.
Okay, so let's break down the possibilities if the sentencing goes on as scheduled. So the judge has already said that the president-elect will not face any jail time. So what does he face here?
Yeah, nothing. It's a symbolic finality to the case, if anything. Justice Juan Merchan has already indicated he would be open to and likely will impose what's known as an unconditional discharge, meaning not only no jail time, no fine, no restrictions on travel, basically, and actually literally no punishment. All it would be is a symbolic finishing of this case. He would be a convicted felon, and it would start the clock for his appeal of the conviction to move forward. Now, he has pending motions to dismiss the case prior to that, but it's really symbolic at this point, which, is take from that what you will, but it's an interesting issue.
Yeah. Interesting issue, especially for those who are tried and convicted for the same issues going forward. It would be fascinating to hear what they think about what happens to them if they are convicted. So while we have you here, let's turn a page here. Another Trump case that we really haven't talked to about in a while, and that's the one down in Georgia. Atlanta DA Fani Willis is asking the Georgia Supreme Court to put her back on the Trump election interference case. This really kind of got me. Is this her last chance to hold on to this prosecution? We know she's deeply invested, but She was also deeply criticized on many points as she advanced in this argument. How likely is it that she'll be allowed back on the case?
I think pretty unlikely. You know, the appellate court in Georgia overturned that trial court's decision saying that Fani Willis could stay on the case. There was an appearance of impropriety that, Fani Willis had engaged in this romantic relationship with a prosecutor she hired, Nathan Wade, and that the remedy, therefore, would just be that Nathan Wade had to leave the prosecutorial team. Now, the appellate court said, she and the entire office needs to be removed from this case because this appearance of impropriety really is too great for the public to stomach, and that even though there wasn't an actual conflict, that appearance is enough to disqualify her. Fani Willis is now taking this up to the Supreme Court in Georgia, saying, look, even though, that's not the rule in Georgia, that, even though there is potentially the appearance of an impropriety, there's no actual conflict for her office to move forward on the case. I don't think she has a good chance of winning. It's a pretty well-known conservative court, and they would have to overturn the appellate court. So I don't see it working out for her.
Caroline Polisi, thank you so much for the updates. We expect, as we await to hear what the Supreme Court will say relative to Donald Trump and that hush money case, we expect to have you back on CBS News 24/7. Don't go too far. We know that could come in at any minute. So we want to take you back out live to Joint Base Andrews and show you what is playing out there. The family of former President Jimmy Carter now boarding that special mission plane, accompanying the body of the late president back to his home state of Georgia. The last time Jimmy Carter left in a state-sponsored plane, he had lost the presidency and said he was just going to go home to rethink and to rebuild his life. And rethink it and rebuild he did. He went to Plains, Georgia. He started so many initiatives that brought peace and prosperity to many, wiped out illness in some of the most disenfranchised parts of the world, and continued a legacy of service. The former president, the guy who always flew coach after the presidency, now being taken back to Georgia and remembered by people as a builder. Quite literally, in fact. Habitat for Humanity photos, all you have to do is go on Google and type in Jimmy Carter, Rosalind Carter, and Habitat for Humanity. You will see the man who was once the leader of the free world with his sleeves rolled up, helping Americans have a pathway to the American dream of home ownership. So we now, after CBS News has covered the funeral for the late President Jimmy Carter and all of the tributes attended by all living U.S. presidents, are now showing you the scene at Joint Base Andrews, where for the final time, Jimmy Carter will leave our nation's capital and once again, go home. His legacy, his impact, sure to carry on for generations. And CBS News 24/7, it is our honor to bring you this picture. Well, in the wake of the deadly terror attack in New Orleans, city leaders scrambled to tighten security ahead of hosting next month's Super Bowl. So let's remember, not long after the Super Bowl, Mardi Gras happens in these very streets you're looking at. So security in New Orleans, and this goes without saying, it is under new and intense scrutiny following that New Year's attack, with the community horrified by what they saw and demanding answers and solutions. So CBS News national reporter Katie Weiss is live on the stream with us. Katie, you were there in the hours after that. Your coverage has been masterful. Talk to us about how the Big Easy is getting ready for one of the biggest sporting events in the world and those security preparations.
Well, good afternoon, Reed. Thank you very much. It's been a tough week for a lot of people here in the Big Easy, myself included, but it's something that we've seen the city become very resilient. Also, some people, as they grieve, they're also starting to feel some emotions of anger, and we saw that play out yesterday in a city council meeting where those locals were demanding some answers about increased security here in New Orleans, including one thing that we heard at that city council meeting was the police superintendent president, recognizing that more experts need to be brought in. She announced that today she'll be bringing in a security consultant, a renowned domestic terrorism investigation expert, Bill Bratton. He's a former police commissioner, both for the city of New York City and formerly served as a police commissioner for the city of Boston, was a police chief in LA as well. He is actually en route here to the Big Easy right now and will be holding a press conference later this afternoon, a press conference I plan to attend, and we'll certainly let you know what happens. Reed?
Well, and as people start to gather for Mardi Gras, we understand that the Department of Homeland Security has really elevated the security level, or that security distinction. Tell us about that, because with that comes extra help to keep Mardi Gras extra safe.
Absolutely. You know, down here, Mardi Gras is a big deal. It's not just on Fat Tuesday. It's a thing that happens for weeks leading up to Fat Tuesday. So there are parades constantly throughout all of those weeks. In fact, there were just some parades earlier this week, and there are going to be more parades at the end of the week. And some of these parades are just pedestrian parades called second line parades, where people just walk. Others are parades involving floats. But those parades are definitely going to be involving a lot more security. There's going to be a lot more resources at the city's fingertips because of that designation from the feds. So we're going to be seeing a lot more troops, more manpower support. We're also going to be seeing more vessels, helicopters, bomb sniffing dogs, things of that nature, even trash trucks or sand trucks from the city to physically block and create barriers in roads to prevent vehicles from entering pedestrian-only roadways.
So let's talk about those barriers. And first of all, our primary thoughts are with the families who have had to bury their loved ones, or families who are still bedside in hospitals. But there's also a discussion happening in New Orleans about those bollards or those barriers that either weren't there on New Year's Day or broke. And the focus on making things safer by way of stronger barriers. What's the conversation where that's concerned?
Absolutely. That was something that has really been a sticking point from the beginning. Many city leaders have continued to contend, well, a terrorist is going to do what a terrorist wants to do. They're going to find a way. They're hell-bent. They're going to find a way to carry out their attack no matter what. However, some locals have argued, well, if certain barriers were working, if they were deployed, then this terrorist wouldn't have been able to travel as far, would not have been able to carry out the attack as significantly as this person was able to do just 1 week ago. And so some of the failures include there were archers that were not placed on sidewalks that we know the city did have. In fact, we know the city purchased over 100 of these types of archers back in 2017. So we're still working to learn more about why they were not deployed. We know that there was a wedge to block traffic that was broken at the time, and several metal bollards across each block that should have been up that were not working in those different intersections throughout Bourbon Street. And so yesterday at the city council meeting that I mentioned was a bit dramatic. Truly, the crowd was audibly flabbergasted to hear city leaders talking about these issues, and it seemed unclear. No one seemed to really know who's supposed to be in charge of maintaining these bollards, maintaining these different barriers. And so that was something I think that city leaders are going to be really focusing in on. The city council is going to be looking into, and we know now the state attorney general is also going to be investigating as to exactly what went wrong, what breakdowns there were, and what needs to be done differently as we approach literally 1 month today, the Super Bowl Sunday, big game day.
Well, Katie, I say this all the time on this broadcast. All national stories really are local stories. And for our viewers, this is the power of having our reporters in your communities, New Orleans, Katie's community. We thank you so much for joining us. Same also, as you saw with reporter Chris Van Cleve, pointing out that hillside in California, that hillside wiped out by fire, homes wiped out. That's his community where he was raised. And so we are living our value in your communities. And when we come back, more on the neighborhoods in California wiped out by wildfire as people now band together to help each other, to dig out, to find better ways and to rebuild. You're watching CBS News 24/7, streaming coast to coast and worldwide. Until we come back, we'll watch our monitors for breaking news. All right, watching live video to our many monitors at CBS News 24/7, telling the story of a California tragedy. Fires in California claiming at least 5 lives. So here's where we are at this hour as breaking news plays out in real time from all of our monitors. More than 1,300 homes and businesses destroyed. 5 wildfires burning around Los Angeles. The 2 largest are the Eaton Fire and the Palisades fires. Both are at 0% containment. So let's look at them. Eaton Fire on the left, Palisades Fire on the right. The Eaton Fire burning near Pasadena, exploding to more than 10,000 acres. Homes and cars burning. Palisades Fire near Malibu, consuming more than 17,000 acres. Because of that acreage, 130,000 people right now are on the run. Evacuation orders or warnings, they are living by the alerts that come minute by minute to their phones. Let's get that in our mind of how many people we're talking about who are on the run out of their homes. Picture 2 massive football stadiums, filling up 2 football stadiums. Get the seats in your mind. Fill up those seats, and that's the number of people who are on the run right now. CBS News 24/7 and all of our crews there on the ground in your neighborhoods will continue covering that throughout the afternoon. This major story also playing out as former President Jimmy Carter had his services in our nation's capital after lying in state for days under the Capitol Rotunda. And now his body has been loaded onto this special mission plane to make his final return home to Georgia, where his family will have private family services and say goodbye to the man the locals in Georgia called Mr. Jimmy. So let's bring in CBS News senior national correspondent Mark Strassman from Plains, Georgia, getting ready to receive their son back into their hometown. You see right there people already gathering to pay tribute to the life and legacy. It's nice to have you there to tell that story.
Hey, Reed, right. You can think of this as Jimmy Carter's final homecoming. The special Mission 39, which is the name of the plane that Jimmy Carter's body is on, is now on its way here to Plains. There's going to be a second funeral service for him here at Maranatha Baptist Church, which was Jimmy Carter's spiritual home. And this is a service really not for Jimmy Carter necessarily the global figure, which is what we heard a lot about. Carter, the friend and neighbor to so many of the folks here in Plains, some of whom you do see over my right shoulder. This is going to be a significant a moment to grieve for this small town. Remember, Reed, about 540 folks live in Plains. This is a very small town, and for them, this hits home like a death in the family. It really does, like a death in a small town. And this will be a reality check for a lot of them that, you know what, their favorite son is not coming back.
I heard an interview that was taped years and years ago with a family member of President Jimmy Carter, a phone call that he took the night he knew that he had lost the election. And the word to the then president, who had just been voted out of office, was, "Come home." What did Plains, Georgia mean to the Carter family, and why did they stay there?
I think it meant everything to them. I mean, Jason Carter, Jimmy Carter's grandson, says he spent 4 years in the White House, 4 years in the governor's mansion in Atlanta here in Georgia, and 92 years in Plains. This is where their lives began, and this is where their lives ended for both of them. And their small town roots were always a part of who they were. They never forgot where they came from. I mean, for a lot of folks in public life, they may have grown up in a certain place, but once they make it in the world, they often don't go back to that place. Well, the Carters, that's not who they were at all. There was a line in the speech given today by Gerald Ford's son Steve, where the line essentially was that for Jimmy Carter, Georgia was not only on his mind, it was in his bloodstream. And that essentially sums up the relationship between this small town and the 39th president.
We thank you so much for your report. What a day it's been. Please give our very best to those who are grieving and honoring the life of the former president there in Plains, Georgia. Thank you. Well, President-elect Donald Trump's work to stop sentencing in his hush money case goes on while that goes on. So Trump fired 2 shots trying to get this delay done or even trying to get it killed. First of all, he sent a petition to the New York Court of Appeals and then a second one asking the Supreme Court to rule. So here's your update on that first component, the New York part. The judge just declined to block Trump's sentencing. So now we await the Supreme Court to weigh in, and there's a ticking clock to the Supreme Court weighing in. Think about this. Trump's sentencing is set to take place as early as tomorrow. So we want to talk to CBS News' Katrina Kaufman. Katrina, you're not only a correspondent, but we're also lucky enough to talk to you because you are a lawyer. So what happens next? This sentencing hearing is supposed to take place tomorrow.
Hi, Reed. Great to be with you. Yes, the sentencing is scheduled for 9:30 a.m. tomorrow. Trump has said that he plans to appear virtually, but as you mentioned, we are waiting for the Supreme Court to weigh in on this. The Manhattan DA gave their response this morning, and we're expecting to hear something from the court by the end of today. That could be a full ruling, or it could be them asking for a brief administrative stay, in which case that would push the sentencing. And what we need here is 4 justices have to vote to grant this stay. And there are real legal questions here. The standard is really supposed to be whether Trump would be caused irreparable legal harm if the sentencing is allowed to move forward. And there are very strong arguments that that wouldn't be the case. As you were talking about with Caroline earlier, the judge has already indicated that he's effectively giving Trump a slap on the wrist here with this unconditional discharge.
All right, so we'll be watching it. And for our viewers at home, make sure that you subscribe to the CBS News YouTube channel and also download that CBS News 24/7 app in the palm of your hand. When the Supreme Court weighs in, Katrina, we will let our viewers know immediately. Those alerts go out very quickly. Katrina Kaufman, correspondent and attorney, it's always great to talk to you. We know you're watching this one closely. You have a good day. Well, what happens when severe weather literally wipes out a water treatment plant in our nation? Well, that's happened to one community as now community members step forward to try to help one another. We're talking about Richmond, Virginia when we come back. CBS News 24/7 in your communities. We are in Richmond, Virginia, going another day without running water because of a winter storm that knocked out power to the city's water treatment plant. It's a crisis for thousands of people who live in that area, and they've been enduring it for 4 days. In fact, the entire city now under an advisory to conserve water. In fact, if they have it, they're told to boil it before they can even drink it. City leaders say the outage could last until tomorrow. So there's a lot to deal with there as you turn on your taps in Richmond. So let's go live now to Jody Alexander. She's president and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Richmond. Jody, it's nice to talk to somebody who's really doing the work at the ground level. We hear the YMCA is stepping up to help. Tell us what that help looks like.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to do so, actually. The Y was founded on, response to community needs, and we do that every single day. But in this opportunity, we get to take our buildings as assets and turn them into community good. So we open them up for anyone that needs a shower. And I know it sounds so simple and basic, but it's actually been more than a shower. There's something about people being, feeling clean and whole as they go to work or they go about their daily life. It's also brought together community. So people that maybe, just needed to have a community connection around what's happening with our water challenge.
And do you have any sense of when the water could be back on and safe to drink without having to boil it there in your community?
Yeah, I mean, our community leaders are keeping us so well informed, and they are sharing consistent information, and they are working around the clock. And I think we all appreciate that, certainly. And so, they're letting us know step by step the progress that's being made. And it looks like we're hopefully at the tail end of all of this. But, the YMCA and others are all coming together, say, okay, how do we just support each other?
How do we support each other? I don't mean to throw you a curveball, and we need to tell our viewers you do not speak for any of the rescue efforts or attempts that are going on in Southern California. But I am struck by the value that you mentioned about using buildings as assets and community coordination. What are your thoughts and feelings for the people in California who are going to need to have those same values as they get through the weeks and months ahead?
Yeah, and actually it's not a curveball at all, because as a YMCA nation and network, we are all connected, and our hearts and prayers obviously are lifting those communities as well. And I know that our YMCA out in LA County is actually affected, but they are still stepping in from a people perspective to support and be there, even in the absence of some building challenges that they have.
Right.
So it goes across that way, all, across our entire network of nation, of constantly showing up where people need it, when they need it, and how they need it.
Jody Alexander, President and CEO YMCA of Greater Richmond, not only talking about the water issue there in Richmond, but also we appreciate your words for the people in Southern California. Thank you. That's the power of community. We love to highlight that. Well, let's talk about the winter storm in Texas. When CBS News 24/7 comes back, we continue being in your communities where your headlines are. We'll have a live report from correspondent Jason Allen, so stay with us. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Okay, so video from our monitors show us a chilly scene in Texas today. There it is. Northern parts of Texas now under a winter storm warning. Communities bracing for freezing rain and icy roads. I have a sister in Texas. She said, "Why is it snowing here where usually it does not snow?" Some areas gearing up for as much as 9 inches of the white stuff. So senior CBS News correspondent Jason Allen. Boy, Jason. CBS, Jason Allen joining us live from Fort Worth. Tell us what you are seeing on the ground there, my friend, and what is the reason we are seeing snow in the Lone Star State?
Reed, your sister's reaction is the same one that just about everybody has here when we get weather like this. It is that unusual. In fact, it's been 4 years since we saw more than 2 inches of snow in this area, and now some areas forecast to get 3 times as much as that, 4 times as much as that. So what we're getting right now here in Fort Worth, and it's the same situation to the east in Dallas, we're right on that dividing line between rain and sleet and snow. So can kind of hear it right now, the ice particles that are bouncing off my jacket, but you can see it's enough that it is collecting in the streets here. I'm going to go over here just to the grass because you can see it sort of piling up in the grass, and you get a sense when you pick it up, right? This is that really wet, icy, thick kind of snow. And so that's developing right now all across this region, and we're really just in the first few hours of it.
All right, so what does it mean for drivers out there on the roads? It doesn't look like there's many people out right now.
No, there aren't many people out. I want to go back to the roadway since you asked about it, because it is the roadway that is really the biggest concern right now for public officials. Look down this roadway, you see tire tracks. Do you see any signs that plows have been here?
No.
No, you don't. And that's because we just don't have the infrastructure for that here. The very few plow attachments that they have, they are focused on those critical facilities, keeping hospital entrances clear, public safety entrances clear. Then they maybe get to some of the hills and some of the critical intersections around the area. But that's the biggest concern, is people getting stranded on the roadways. The state has brought more resources up from the south just to try to spread across those interstates and those critical areas. Hopefully that's enough and it doesn't get bad enough out here that anybody ends up in that situation where they're stranded in this weather.
Hopefully everybody stays safe. $50 if you post on social media, Jason, you doing a snow angel. Thank you so much for joining us on CBS News 24/7. Let's turn our monitors now to New Mexico. You know, moments ago, the state Supreme Court there struck down restrictions on abortion procedures in conservative cities. The ruling protects the state's status as a safe haven for people to have access to abortions from states that are facing bans. The Supreme Court expanded on their decision, saying the local restrictions go against state laws. We wanted to show you that. Port strike averted. Here's your headline from our nation's shipping world. The International Longshoresmen Association reached a tentative 6-year contract deal with shipping and port operators. That means that things will continue to ship back and forth and is a go. The details, though, of the negotiations have yet to be announced, but it's likely you will not see people on the picket lines now that they've signed on the dotted line. We want to thank you today. Amidst all of this breaking news, a momentous day here on CBS News. Fires in Southern California and laying a president to rest. That's it for us on CBS News 24/7.